Have you ever wondered how home prices can feel so out of reach, even when everyone keeps saying the economy is fine? Millions of Americans wake up every morning with the same quiet fear, checking rent prices, mortgage rates, and savings accounts, asking themselves how buying a home became this hard. Inflation keeps eating away at paychecks, grocery bills are higher than they were a few years ago, and suddenly the dream of owning a home feels like it is slipping further away. Some people are calling it a housing crash, others say everything is normal. And in the middle of all that noise, regular people are left confused and anxious, trying to understand what is really happening in the US housing market. This is Crypto Brainpower, a channel created to help beginners understand money, markets, and the forces shaping our financial lives. Here, we break down complex topics in a calm, honest way, without hype or shortcuts, so you can build understanding step by step and think clearly about the long term. Before we go deeper, share your thoughts in the comments. What do you want to understand next about the stock market, real estate, or the US economy? Subscribe to support the channel and continue learning with us. To understand whether the US housing market is heading for a crash, we have to step back and look at how we got here. After years of low interest rates, money was cheap. Mortgages were affordable, monthly payments felt manageable, and demand exploded. Families rushed to buy homes. Investors bought properties as rentals. Builders tried to keep up, but supply never fully matched demand. Prices climbed steadily, and then suddenly they surged. When inflation began rising sharply, the Federal Reserve stepped in. Through a series of interest rate hikes announced at Federal Reserve meetings, borrowing costs increased across the economy. Mortgage rates that once hovered around 3% moved much higher. That single change altered the math for millions of buyers. A home that once fit comfortably into a household budget suddenly felt impossible. This is where fear enters the conversation. People remember 2008. They remember foreclosures, collapsing prices, and financial panic. The question everyone asks is whether history is about to repeat itself. But the truth is more complicated than a simple yes or no. Today's homeowners are in a very different position than they were before the last housing crash. Many locked in low fixed-rate mortgages. Their monthly payments did not rise with interest rates. Lending standards have been stricter, and most buyers have stronger credit profiles. That does not mean there is no risk, but it does mean the foundation looks different. At the same time, affordability is under real pressure. CPI inflation reports show that everyday costs remain elevated. Jobs reports tell us employment is still relatively strong, but wage growth has not always kept pace with rising expenses. For first-time buyers, especially younger Americans, the gap between income and home prices feels overwhelming. This is where misunderstanding often takes over. A crash does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like prices staying flat for years. Sometimes it looks like certain cities correcting while others remain stable. And sometimes it looks like fewer people buying, fewer homes selling, and more people choosing to wait. Investors often compare real estate to the stock market to make sense of risk. Think about companies like Apple, Amazon, or Tesla. Their stock prices do not move in straight lines. They rise, fall, pause, and recover based on earnings, interest rates, and economic expectations. The S&P 500 reflects that same pattern over time. Real estate behaves similarly, just more slowly and with higher emotional stakes. Platforms like Robinhood, Fidelity, and Charles Schwab make it easy to see how markets react to news. A single CPI release or Federal Reserve statement can move stocks in minutes. Housing reacts over months and years. That delay can make changes feel sudden, even when they have been building quietly in the background. One truth that rarely gets discussed is how psychological the housing market really is. When people believe prices will keep rising, they rush in. When fear spreads, everyone hesitates at the same time. That hesitation can cool the market without a dramatic collapse. Sellers stop listing. Buyers stop bidding. Activity slows, and prices stabilize or drift downward in certain areas. There are also regional realities. The US housing market is not one single market. A city tied to tech jobs may feel pressure when companies slow hiring. Another area with limited housing supply may remain strong despite higher rates. National headlines often hide these local differences. Another uncomfortable truth is that owning a home has always involved uncertainty. Even during stable periods, life changes happen. Job losses, health issues, and economic slowdowns affect people differently. Real estate is not a guaranteed path to wealth, just like stocks are not guaranteed to rise every year. Understanding that reality is part of becoming financially mature. Long-term thinking matters here. Over decades, U.S. real estate has generally grown alongside population, productivity, and economic expansion. But that growth includes long stretches of stagnation and volatility. Patience has always been part of the equation, even if social media makes it seem like everyone else is winning overnight. What we are seeing now looks less like a sudden collapse and more like a slow adjustment. Higher interest rates are forcing the market to breathe, to reset expectations, and to remind everyone that prices cannot rise faster than incomes forever. That process can feel painful, especially for those trying to buy their first home or those worried about timing. Clarity comes from separating fear from facts. Watching Federal Reserve decisions, CPI inflation data, and jobs reports gives context. Understanding how interest rates affect mortgages explains why demand changes. Comparing housing to long-term stock market behavior helps normalize cycles instead of fearing them. The calm confidence comes from accepting uncertainty without panic. Markets move. Economies shift. What matters is discipline, patience, and realistic expectations. Learning how these systems work does not remove risk, but it replaces confusion with understanding. If you are feeling overwhelmed by headlines about a real estate crash, you are not alone. Many Americans are quietly asking the same questions, trying to plan their futures in an uncertain environment. The goal is not to predict the exact moment prices move, but to understand the forces at work so fear does not control your decisions. This video is only for educational purpose, not financial advice.